The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Hello everyone, my name is Ray Arell. This is episode 18 of the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network is brought to you by Agile Alliance. This is a place where that we can basically get together with, right now, 350 of your closest friends. It enables us to learn and share the ways that we've actually done Agile adoptions within our companies. It's entirely free and it's safe. All we do here is we go through these questions that have been crowdsourced, and then we pick the top one that's on the top of the list, and then we start a conversation on it. The conversation goes as long as it needs to go, so it could take up the entire hour, or it might, just go for a few minutes. We're just let the group decide on how we want to go. So today's top question is, what are some ways of promoting the value of Agile coaching? And Jorg, would you like to take a stab at going at this one?
Yeah, sure. So definitely one thing is really making visible to whoever you want to promote this to, what's the benefit. So think about what's their problem and address it. If you're talking to top management or key business leaders, make them understand where you're really contributing in terms of their pain points, be it schedule, be it motivation of the teams. Make sure they get a feedback loop to what is the difference. Same actually is true for the Agile coaches themselves, because sometimes the position can be really hard. So if you want to help them as well, or your peers as well, however you put it, make sure they still recognize the benefits they are creating. So a lot is about noticing and translating into something that matters to somebody else. And probably one thing in addition is don't talk too much about Agile, because it gets boring if it becomes a phrase instead of a benefit.
Do you find, though, that executives or management really understand what an Agile coach is?
I think they understand things Agile coaches do if it's in terms of their benefit. And if they start to recognize that somebody is doing something really good. So, for example, if a team manages to achieve a certain goal, or suddenly quality really gets significantly better in a new product, and the feedback is, it's because we worked like that, and we wouldn't have done that evolution or learning just exactly because we had the freedom to have this guy look at it. If you get conversations like that going, then it opens up. Don't go there and say, I have an Agile coach and he's going to do this, this, and this. That is very often not understood. They just don't take the time to look into the entire mechanism of Agile. So I think it's really trying to go about the benefits, the recognition. If other people talk about what they've learned, then it's different. Improving is something they do understand. We get better at doing X. Suddenly we are more effective, even if it's not sudden at all. And then putting it into perspective, and especially explaining it's not just luck, it's hard work that goes into it.
Hendrik, how about yourself?
I pretty much agree to what Jörg was saying. Maybe a few further things. I mean, from my point of view, of course, it's always a question, who do you want to promote this to? And you need to speak the receiver's language, if you will. So if you talk to executives, don't use a product development language too much. Speak in their terms, like what are their problems? What is the job to be done for them in terms of evolving the organization and driving the change together with them? So for example, agile coaches, I think they can be also promoted as a way to help driving the change that also executives want to see in the organization. So they are not alone. They are actually joining forces with the executives. So that could be one angle to approach it. Another thing, I think, at least from my experience, it's often a struggle to connect the positive outcomes of agile coaching to the work that the agile coaches are doing. So I once was talking to a manager in our organization, and she was really saying, okay, I asked my agile coaches, what are you actually doing, and how do you what's your contribution to the organization? And those coaches were unable themselves to convey this in a good way. So they were like, yeah, we have been organizing that and that meeting, and we have been coaching that and that team and so on, but they were not able to promote really what is the result of their work. And so she was actually asking, okay, so they couldn't really convince me that they had, it was them who had the good impact on the organization. So I think there's also this, is it able to measure it in any way? And how can you really connect the outcome to what the coach has been doing? Think about those things.
Sure. Brian, what do you have to add to this?
Well, so I think when you're talking about the value of agile coaching, of course you talk about the positive outcomes, but you really talk about the experience you have to know what good looks like. So one of the ways that I've shown this before, at least just in a conversational point, early in the conversation especially, is you show the Satir model, or sometimes called the J curve. And of course, if you're not familiar with it, it starts off with the point of when you start a change, you go into that dip period of chaos and turmoil. Turmoil is my word for it. And then you start to come out of it. And I like to talk around the agile coaches help the team through those chaotic periods and stay on the path that, even though they don't know how this is going to be, we guide them through that. And then, of course, once you get to the other side of that dip, we're all about continuous improvement, so we enact another one. But that's really kind of where I look at, experience and then using that visual to explain what we do.
What happens though when you have a manager though that tells you that, hey, we have managers and managers are the coaches around this place?
So I personally think that and when I've encountered this before, I think managers do a good job at coaching performance, or even the how to do well at the organization that they're at. But unless that manager is fluent in Agile, which most of them would not be, they're still not going to know how to implement a new process. So similar to the way we would bring in a consultant, either internally or externally, to do any new technology or any new domain that we would need to take on to be successful. It's the same path. You wouldn't expect your frontline managers to go learn a new vendor skill or some type of other tool set.
That makes sense. Anesh?
Yes. So what I wanted to bring up was basically training, or rather communicating with the executives in a way that they do not take it as something that somebody else has to do it, but they have to be part of it. What I have seen in organizations is that we go to the executives and then they provide us with a bunch of teams for agile transformation because they just want to reap benefits, but we do not see that agile concept of budgeting being applied at all by the executives, including financials. So I believe that we are doing bottom-top training, but we are not doing really top-down coaching, as to how they should start looking at, changing their own style of working, including budgeting. So they are not inspiring change, they are pushing change. And that is something that causes a failure. And every team feels that, they have been pounded upon an agile transformation requirement. And in some cases, Scrum may be better, Kanban may be, in some other cases, Kanban is better, and no customization is made, and it's just top down when it comes to pushing it. but is not inspiring to the teams. And as a result, what happens is after some time, like 3 months or 4 months, they realize that they are not accruing the benefits they were told it will accrue. Like for example, a basic need for agile transformation is software automation. That's not done. Okay, at the team level. So the test automation. Okay, so we've got to really go in a way where it will cause benefit to the organization, be effective rather than just managing the show there and staying there, and the teams are not in accruing the benefits that agile actually brings.
Sure, I fully agree with that. I think the challenge always comes that if you look at the role of agile coach within the organization, it sometimes gets shoehorned into some of the other processes that are around. And one of the things that I never think of an agile coach, especially in framing what they do, is, and I think Hendrik, I think you hinted on this, which is, how are we improving, employee satisfaction? How are we improving customer satisfaction? How are we improving retention? How are we improving delivery performance of the organization? Framing it in those words really helps others to pay attention, especially up in the higher ranks.
The question here is that how can we actually come to an understanding or a platform where executives understand that they have to change their way of looking at things, and the benefit comes with a cost, and the cost is that their involvement, right? And how can we make that happen as coaches?
Do you think it's involvement, or do you think it's more empowerment? Which is, I had an executive a long time ago who said, I am going to allow you to be me when it comes to decisions of these matters. And now when they gave me that, I mean, I could have used that as a hammer and beat everyone over the head with it and said, look, hey, I'm that person now. You have to listen to me because I've been empowered to do that. Or do you think that it's more that it really needed that person's attention through there?
Yeah, I actually believe that because the executives, you look at the performance appraisal, okay? It goes to the executives. If executives are not involved, do you think that the performance will be as expected and will be just not managing the show rather than having an effective adoption and transformation? It doesn't work like that. It's like being, I'm going to be a pig and not a chicken, right?
Yeah.
So or the other way around rather. So you've got to, they have to be pigs as well. So they have to be party to it. And because just saying some words like, oh, we are going to get software delivered early now, and this will be the benefit, and you'll have, no, it doesn't work like that, because that's just being pushy and it's not inspiring. So they have to be there like every 2 weeks. We've got to be able to meet the executive management, say these are the challenges being faced around the processes, and or around people, or around your own involvement. We've got to be able to be vocal and say that. And I've been bitten when I have been vocal, but I felt that I'm not doing my justice to my role if I'm not doing that.
Right. So, Sean, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so some of the things I've experienced over the last few years is that, especially at the executive level, that when you're trying to go through an agile kind of transformation, that they feel that their empowerment is going to be taken away from them. Their managerial aspect of what they do is going to be taken away from them. And for me, it's trying to understand, to get the message across to them in a way that their role is changing, as opposed to it's no longer that kind of push down ethos that they're kind of used to, but it's that push up and supportive aspect that I try and get them to drive through the organization and to support the various teams. So it's just getting them to understand that we're not taking anything away from them per se. It's just that their role will morph into something quite different. And I think in that aspect then, they can start that journey of becoming an agile coach themselves anyway, with the support of somebody who's got that experience of being an agile coach.
Yeah, and I agree with that. There's an exercise that I typically do with managers, and that is and to make them not feel threatened about what the transformation is going on. And what I have them do is I have them write on an individual Post-it note the tasks that they do daily, and they write on other Post-it notes the tasks that they do weekly and monthly and yearly, and have them put them all in front of them. And so they have this big list of things that they're responsible for. And then I ask them to go up to the board and say, well, if you think that now belongs to, say, the Agile coach, or maybe the product owner, or some other new role that's come into the environment, go ahead and take that Post-it note and go put it up next to that person's role. And what happens is that they'll go through that exercise, and at the end, there's still a big set of Post-it notes sitting in front of them. I then ask them that the stuff that you have in front of you is do you have time to do all of that stuff? And most of the time, people will answer up and say, no, I do not have enough time to go off and do all of these things. And now that I have these other roles that are coming in, I can now do these things that are strategic and are important to the organization better.
Maybe adding just to that, and looking again at your question, Ray, what would you respond if the manager or the executive says, I've got managers to coach? Then actually I would ask who are the best of those, and then ask them, are they really doing a good job in terms of coaching and developing? And they probably will come up with a lot of shortcomings if they're really good at it. And they probably already have the need to make a decision where to focus. And if this weakness becomes more obvious, then there's already the call to action available.
I agree with that. I think that, if you use the sports analogy, would we ever take a group of people, and put them on the field and not give them any coaching in order to be able to perform a sport? What team in the NFL doesn't have coaches? And not just one coach, but has multiple coaches helping everyone do different aspects of the game. And I know as a coach myself, I'm not good across the entire gamut of skills that need to be, people that need help in those areas. I need a team of people that I can employ in order to be able to make this the most effective team that I can. And I think that's the missing point that most of us do. They think that you either come with your skills and that's it, and I'm not going to give you any more coaching to be better. You're just going to have to be you either do what we need you to do or you're disposable, versus the value of being able to take an investment of an employee and say that, look, we've already invested a lot in this individual. Let's invest a little bit more and make this a better team. How about others?
A question I usually ask myself is, how do I know as a coach that I'm being successful? So to answer that for myself, I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Some of what various people said kind of speak into that, but I was interested in what some other views might be.
Oh, just measuring your own effectiveness in your work?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a couple ones. I know Lisa Maxwell, she put a comment in the box here, but she says that she compiles a set of the OKRs as well as the stuff that they're doing and got done for the week and the percentage of completion. So, usefulness of being able to do time to information, being able to escalate issues. And in my particular case, I think of what impediments did I remove for the team this week? And if I removed 5 key impediments that were slowing the team down, I consider myself actually doing pretty well for the organization. How about others? How do you measure yourself?
Hi, Ray. It's Linda Cook.
Hey, Linda.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
On the question of how do you measure yourself, at the end of the day, it's got to be around customer satisfaction. And in the case of a coach, the customer range is so broad. And depending on which level coach and how you're engaging with the organization. But clearly, Are the team members satisfied? You know, do they actually come to you and seek advice? Some of these things are, you know, most of this work is qualitative, and it's very hard to put hard metrics around, other than if you're measuring your abilities by how well the teams are doing. So if you're seeing improvements in the teams and you know that, you know, those improvements are a result of the coaching that you've been doing, then that's another way to get feedback. And of course, you always want to have an ongoing conversation with the leadership team that you're working with, and constantly soliciting their feedback around, you know, are things going as they expected? Are there things that they would like to see differently? And things of that nature. And at the end of the day, I think some of the most important metrics are, I find, the self-satisfaction. You know, I guess I've been doing this coaching work now for a little while in a couple different situations. And after a time, you develop a sense of, am I making a difference? And I think that's really important. And how much difference are you making? Because oftentimes I find as a coach, I have to self-select out because I know I've delivered as much value as I really can, giving the customer what they really need. And it's time to help them move on to the next phase where they're actually much more capable of doing much of the work themselves.
That's really great. I mean, I just got through LinkedIn a message from an individual that I was coaching and mentoring probably about 4 years ago. And the person just out of the blue just sent me a note and said, you know, I want to really thank you for the help that you provided me back then. So sometimes it's not instantaneous. It happens over time. And I think that's really cool when that occurs and happens. Let's see. Kevin, do you have something to add as well? Well, Kevin had his hands up. Kevin, you now have your microphone enabled. You are, there you go. There's Kevin.
There we go.
There it is.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, buttons aren't toys, man. I got to be careful on how I, press these things sometimes.
Great conversation, by the way. I'm not a super experienced coach. Our organization, we're still in the beginning stages of rolling out Disciplined Agile. But I am a coach and I'm finding it very exciting. I'm finding it really rewarding. And the one comment that I heard that I was just kind of questioning was, you're feeling you're being successful if you're removing impediments, for example. So I'm just kind of wondering what those impediments might be. I'm thinking process-oriented organizational barriers, perhaps, that you're removing, because as an Agile coach, my understanding would be you want the team to encounter barriers and obstacles and see how they can remove them and get through them together. You want them to have that experience and learn from failure if need be.
Right.
So what types of impediments would you be removing?
Well, I should probably give background. So the coaching that I was doing was at an enterprise level across the corporation. So most of the time, the impediment removal was something that was really big, and it became strategic projects. It wasn't a tactical, I need this one thing in order to go finish this one task. They were things like the way that we have our teams organized, with having people in the U.S. and India and Israel and I can name a bunch of other different countries. We have that organized wrong. We're funding our projects in ways that is making time zone hops expensive and is keeping people up really late at night. So those big impediments that I wouldn't expect a team to go remove, it's how do we now change our strategic staffing plan for our organization so that we now fund people in the same time zones, those types of things.
Oh, I see. Yeah, great. Thanks for that. And I think from my perspective as well, if I'm being successful, I'm learning. If I can show myself that I'm even learning as through a coach assignment, I think the organization is definitely winning by training and improving coaching skills. So the organization wins as well as myself. So I think that's a way to also measure if you're being successful. But I also get feedback directly through the team leads, through the product owners and the architect owners. that also help me understand where it is that I've been successful in helping them.
That's all great. And I think sometimes though the quantification sometimes becomes a little bit difficult, especially with the narratives that we receive. And what I find is that with, you can turn any, you can create a quantitative system, which is, here are the number of endorsements that have been given to me. And here's the number of things that are not endorsing me. And this is how I'm working on these things. The important thing is just how you kind of open up and just say, hey, these things are occurring and happening, and I'm willing to go share the good and the bad of how my performance is helping the team. The last comment, and then I'm going to pivot us to a new question, is just the fact that one of the things I've always internalized as a coach is I'm not doing the delivery. I'm not the one who's actually producing the value that the individuals in those teams are actually creating. I'm helping them. And it's important in that separation. And I think management had this problem for a number of years as well, which is I don't lift a line of code. I don't put, I don't code. I'm not doing the development work. I'm not doing any of the stuff that's getting the stuff shipped. That's their accomplishment. My accomplishment is I help them to do it better, and that's the important part. So the next question that's up here, I'm going to go ahead and pivot us as we're coming to the bottom of the hour. What are the limits to scaled agile adoptions in large organizations? How do we adjust the approach when rolling it out? And as always, if anyone wants to join the conversation, raise your hand and I'll enable your microphone. Does anyone want to start on this one?
I think if I may start, what are the limits? I don't think there are really limits. The thing is, scaling agile, I'm always a bit cautious with phrasing it like this. Scaling agility, I would rather call it. So, and agility might mean different things depending on where in the organization you work. So how to adjust the approach to rolling it out? I think I'm very much a friend of having clear principles on the thing. And of course, the Agile Manifesto is providing some principles, but those principles are mainly for resonating with the people in the software development. And for example, if I would scale or roll this out, actually, I would not talk about scaling there. I would say rolling out agility in, let's say, finance and HR. There would rather lean towards using beyond budgeting as a framework, because there the principles and guidelines, they are more resonating with the language of people working in those parts of the organization. So I would steal with pride from other disciplines who basically have the same idea, which is bringing agility into the organization.
So what you're saying is that principles scale, but frameworks don't? Am I reading that wrong?
I'm very cautious with ready-made frameworks, honestly, because for me, one of my favorite terms is always fit for purpose. Every company is different. Of course, we are all human beings. We have the same kind of problems, but all the companies are different because they have different leaders, different cultures, and so on. And we are slightly in different businesses. So even within a large organization like the one I'm working in, I see slight differences in the concrete way how to implement agility, a way of working, providing agility. So I think just taking a ready-made framework, I'm very hesitant. I think it's better to think it through yourself and let principles plus a good agile coach guide you.
Yeah, maybe just adding to what Henrik already said, and I like this very much to be clear here. I think the limit is actually when it gets into, let's say, a self-driving activity. So it's about being agile, fulfilling whatever KPIs, so getting into the do it again mode. So exactly losing the mindset. The feeling we are now so agile, we're so proud of it, we don't learn all these kind of stuff. That stops scaling.
Yeah,
and I do have a problem with the word scale, and that for And it's like saying that, and again, the design for fit, which I fully agree with you, Hendrik. Here we have something that was perfectly designed for 12 people to do their work effectively, and now we're going to go stretch it to 100 or 100,000 people. That becomes a systems engineering task at that point. How do I, engineer the most effective workflow for a team? And it's going to depend on the type of work that's being performed and the types of jobs that people are doing. And there's a lot of work that goes into organizational design. Frameworks can give us a couple of examples of what's worked well at certain scales, but to paint it as it's going to fix all my problems, if I just act and work and behave this way, it just doesn't work for me, unfortunately.
So, Ray, though, one experience I have had with this is, especially when you're working with Scrum and those frameworks, having understanding of a scaled Scrum framework like Less or Safe, since all of your problems are magnified at scale, they have different tools and different understandings, different techniques that you can apply. And it really helped even in my own personal kind of understanding of how to apply Scrum, understanding and having a good depth in scaled practices. So, I mean, I would think if, as an Agile coach, it's a beneficial process to learn those practices and frameworks. And if you're not familiar with them, don't think that you can apply like a one team Scrum, for example, to a large team.
And Brian, I fully agree with that. I mean, I think that you should be well versed in different systems that are available, including traditional systems. You should go look over at what Prince and Prince 2, and go look off at some of the early work that was done with other models. And I think that's how you gain your ability to say, well, let's go try this experiment. Maybe this will help remove or improve the way that we're delivering. So yeah, I agree that getting exposure to it. I think though that, and I guess maybe I'm a little tainted because the problem that I was dealing with, for most of my career was the 100,000 person problem. And I would have individuals coming to me saying that this is going to work for my 100,000 employees. And it really wasn't. And it wasn't really engineered to be able to do that. And that's where my skepticism comes from. And typically, and no offense to consultants, and because I am one now today, that this sort of salesmanship of almost sounding like you're at an Army recruiting office where, I can't tell you how this scaled framework has, improved my life. It's, it's also, grown me a full head of hair. They oversell it, and maybe that's where some of my negativity is coming from.
Yeah. Also, when you look at conferences, how many talks there are on this is how I fixed my safe implementation or whatever. So people think they can take a ready-made framework and just implement it, use it as is. Then they see, oh, this is not helping me totally. So they need to start evolving from there and fix it. There's tons of talks around that kind of thing.
So yeah. I always think it's interesting when somebody tries to take a ready-made framework that's meant to be small and apply it large, and then have trouble figuring out why it's not working on a large scale because it's not meant to do that.
That's very true, and I've had a lot of conversations with people that actually, because they thought it was going to fix their larger picture, that becomes the group of people who say that Agile doesn't work. And or as Scrum has been used in the past, I've heard people say that they've been scrummed, or they've been safed, or they've been lessed.
The moment you use Agile as a noun, the things go wrong.
Exactly, and the rehabilitation of people when they get that far where it was such a bad experience for them, I feel very, very bad for them. Seen Cynthia, you put your mic off mute. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, basically what I found, and I've been doing this for about 8 years, is that people above the team don't necessarily want to change. So the way that I help people get a handle on scaling, and maybe scaling just means having a scrum of scrums, is that I tell them that Scrum is an application development framework. It's how each individual Scrum team works, delivering each piece of code or whatever every 2 weeks or whatever your sprint is, but it doesn't take the place of product or project management or program management. Mm-hmm. And rather than telling people, oh, they need to go safe, I try to help them figure out ways that, given if they have a PMO, if they're a larger organization, I don't even think the program manager has to change. You have to just figure out where the project management is going to be and how you're going to status report so that people can continue to do what they want to do. Because, based on the prior conversation, I personally found that people are afraid when Agile comes in and they don't understand it. I mean, so as a coach, you need to make sure everybody's had this proper training or the same training. It's not just the Scrum Masters or maybe the engineering team. All the people on the product side who are going to be involved also need to be trained. And I don't understand sometimes why managers don't want to be trained, because their approach to managing people is going to be different. So a lot of times it's just a misunderstanding and fear that keeps people from becoming totally or more agile at a corporate level. So I think sometimes coaches need to definitely understand how the teams above the teams people are performing and what those relationships are, and helping the Scrum teams figure out how to status report and give the people the information in a format that they're as close to how they're used to seeing it as possible. A lot of times when I come in brand new as a coach and Scrum Master, sometimes for the first couple of teams, I will take the exact status report that people are providing on their waterfall projects, and I will pull the information like out of Jira or out of Rally, and then I will format it in the same way to give them % complete and things like that. So I find the closest you can keep the teams running Scrum or Kanban or whatever it is, and the rest of the people running in exactly the same way, the more chance you have of success, because everybody does not want to change. Some of these people have been in the same roles for years and years and years, and the fear is strong. So if you can't get them to be trained and increase their understanding and lower their fear and sense of risk, the better, because or else people will try to sabotage it. And I've seen some of that. So I've had Scrum teams that are super, super successful, but upper management has still squashed things because they don't want to change. So, I mean, a lot of it is it's always helpful to come into a place where upper management is on board and you're not trying to middle management up, you're top managing down, I guess. But I guess that's my thing. A lot of people don't talk that why do you really have to change that much above the Scrum team? You can, once you have velocity, you can figure out how big are these epics based on the component sizes or something like that, and % complete. So if your epic's 100 points and you're halfway through and you have 65 points left, you probably aren't kind of going to make it. Or you can, at the beginning of the quarter, what your velocity is. If you size your work, you'll know if you can make it, things like that. Then you can speak in the language of as is, but allow the people to get more stuff done because they're practicing Scrum.
I fully agree with that. I just posted an article up on a blog post on agile.org, agilealliance.org, about status quo and how a status quo will defend itself. It will absolutely kick you in the teeth if you trigger the immune system.
Maybe one thing to add to Cynthia, because you were saying the people above the team. I've noticed that the higher you go up in the hierarchy, the more people are not really aware of the team they are part of, at least not as conscious for whatever reason. And sometimes it's very, very helpful to point out that there is a team that actually benefits from doing things like retrospectives, setting a plan, following up on their level more regularly together. and suddenly their world changes as well. So if you can discover and just in parentheses, new teams and make them work together, you're going to add a lot to an organization's flexibility, self-observation, and culture.
Yeah, I think you need to be really careful when you're in agile transformation that as you go up the ladder and start reaching the executives and management in the company, yes, they're out of touch with who the teams are that are working in an agile way, but we need to be careful as coaches to ensure that there is an understanding and a mindset that can support agile in the organization. So the more we can help to shift that mindset and help them understand how the agile mindset changes the way they do their work, that they're expected to change the way they manage and lead in order to have successful teams. That's our responsibility as coaches.
Absolutely.
I fully agree with that. And I think that the challenge of the whole, if only executives would understand me more. And I hear this all the time from agile coaches. Reality is, I think that stretching of thinking that the person whose responsibility is not about the delivery, their responsibility is to represent the corporation to the shareholders, or to they're responsible for the marketing of the corporation. They're responsible for these bigger, more strategic things. It's how do I enable my conversation to resonate to how that's making their life easier. And making it so that you're not standing in front of a customer having to say that, I'm sorry, we had that last major defect that's causing us to not ship on time, or this other miss, or this other issue, that it actually makes their life easier. Those are the things that we need to highlight and build trust between the executives and with the delivery teams.
I was just going to quickly mention, I think really when you're speaking to the limits or limitations for scaling Agile, you're always going to run into the skills and knowledge, competencies across your workforce, and that's going to limit your ability as well. One thing that we're actually doing in our organization is what we term as strategic workforce planning. So if we look across the various job families that are impacted by the Agile rollout and adoption, and try and get in front of that in terms of what skill sets do we need and what kind of training do we need to implement in order to get ahead of the adoption curve and continuously allow us to expand the adoption across the organization. So that's one thing that we've been doing recently.
I will say though, it's interesting from everybody's perspective, because I've actually kind of found the opposite. Usually the higher up the management structure, at least in the last probably 3 or 4 years, the easier it's been to sell, an agile transformation. It's when you get into the actual implementation on the lower levels at the Scrum level, the Scrum team level, and then maybe the director level above that, the ones who actually have the deliverables in their annual performance reviews and that type of thing. Those are the ones that really have the hardest time accepting the agile and tying it to their annual objectives. The top half has always been the easiest.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would. We're having exactly the opposite experience. It's the organizational impediments that exist that don't provide clarity to moving to enabling teams. For example, to have a product owner that's dedicated, that a Scrum Master that's dedicated. That where do these people come from? The company's been working for a long time. These people have existing roles. We put them in these new roles. What happens to the other work that they had to do? Oftentimes they're asked to continue doing their old role plus the new stuff, and it's just not effective or fair to the team.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the hearts, minds, and wallets. The executives that are the best are the ones who will invest in all 3 areas. They have their heart in Agile. They're going to put the necessary investments in it, and they're working themselves in an Agile way themselves. There's a couple companies that I go look at, and I'm so envious to go see them because they're being ran by people who have all three of those qualities. I see some that will just have one of those, and those don't work so well. And in the case, I think, Ruth, what you're pointing to is that they might have their mind and saying, yeah, this is really great. I'm into what you're doing. But don't let that mess up the rest of your work. It becomes it's a bonus job, and
exactly, yeah,
and it's not. Some of this stuff, and I know one of the questions that was on the side screen here was talking about portfolio management and portfolio management tools in Agile. And I could tell you that one of the things I've seen with executives looking at their portfolios, the one thing they don't have on that portfolio board is the investments that they're making internally in their organizations to make it better, and how they are reinvesting time that they might have saved by improving a methodology, by implementing a methodology and improving the throughput of the team. How are they making those reinvestments? Are they making it in these roles that we need? Or are they just suddenly spending it in other areas that they shouldn't, or do something really awful like, hey, we adopted Agile, we're 30% more effective, let's get rid of 30% of our staff, And that's the worst scenario.
Which is that's what causes fear in Agile transformation, is fear of the redefinition of roles and responsibilities and what happens to my job. And it can be at all levels, even at management level. If they're looking at Agile and they don't see a position for whatever their management role is defined as, well, then they might worry that they're no longer going to be important. They're going to have to find a new job. And so they're going to resist that change. And so we need to find a way to make this transformation and the pivot from one role or job title to a different Agile supportive role safe for people, and understand that their value still exists. It's just we have different needs.
But Ruth, I'm the defender of the status quo. I need to keep it in place because that's how I've made my fame and fortune in the company.
Exactly.
And now if I'm something else, what am I going to do? I lose my identity, and I won't be able to go to any of the reindeer games anymore. And I'll hate that.
Yeah, it does. The fear keeps people back from being it just makes them resistant to this change because they're afraid of how it really will affect them. Bottom line, money-wise, even. What is their position in the company? It's scary to them.
Well, isn't it the hierarchy of needs, or security? And it's really interesting. I've seen this with companies that have had almost zero attrition. I mean, just 100-year-old companies. And there was an Agile adoption that was going on back east at a financial institution I was working with, and they suddenly became frightened as this transformation was coming through. And I asked the question, well, what's the attrition rate here? And they said it was close to zero. And I was kind of shocked well, you never had a layoff before. What makes you think you're going to have a layoff now? And they were genuinely scared that because they've heard rumors that others in the environment had laid off staffs after they've made these efficiency gains, that they were going to be next on this. And so they were not consciously, I don't think, sabotaging it, but it's that unconscious fighting against something because they didn't know what was going to be next, that uncertainty. I don't want to live that way. I don't know about the rest of you. How about any final thoughts? We are like 5 minutes to the top of the hour.
I think it's always good if you make people part of the solution and not push them back and make them feel they are part of the problem. What I usually try to do is get people to understand that, or try to wake up their growth mindset and make them feel, hey, we can do our job better. We can maybe have more fun doing what we are doing. And let's explore how we can do things in a better way. it's usually unlocking a lot of motivation, and then also people don't develop so much fear if they are thinking of, okay, nobody is questioning that I'm doing a bad job. I want to make a change myself.
Yeah, and I think that's always important. And I think one of the problems with, and I guess this is the bureaucracies that get formed up in organizations. I remember there was a time in the past with a company I used to work for that they would always rotate their executives. And the executives would rotate probably every 3 to 5 years. They would never be in a job for longer than that. And they would rotate to a totally a new role for them. They would go from, say, a development organization to a marketing organization. And it was sort of genius in a lot of regards, because what that was doing was showing people that it's okay to take new jobs and new adventures within the company, and we were big enough that it could support it. The other thing is we never had layoffs. We had something called redeployment. And redeployment was, yep, we were wrong about that market over there that we thought we were going to make billions of dollars on over there, but it actually didn't take place. So we're not going to lay you off. We're going to continue the investment that we have in you because we hired the best of the people that we could get. Do you want to go and work in one of these other organizations that might interest you? And they would encourage that, versus I think it's a new trend now where it's like, okay, well, we're going to lay off a significant investment in people, which is an unfortunate place to be.
Yeah, actually, to add to this, I think one fear that people have often higher up in the hierarchy is that the value they measure themselves against is their salary. So any change bears the risk of more fulfilling work for less money. And if the fulfillment comes from the money, that option is no longer there. But actually, it's a lot of freedom to say, I don't care about exactly how much money is in the bank. If it's enough, I'm going to go for the more fun job. And then suddenly a lot of things become less scary if you have a second value to put on the scale against the money. So
Right.
Life becomes more open.
But yeah, I think that if we can provide the hierarchy of needs for people, and if we provide them the trust and security to be able to think of new things, to be able to kind of expand themselves out a bit, then that works. But if you have that scarcity in the company and everyone's fearful, these adoptions are incredibly hard. We are at the top of the hour. I really enjoyed this conversation this week. One thing also to note is I will be at the Deliver Agile event that'll be in Austin, Texas, that starts in a week and a half, actually, not this coming week, but the week after. If you are a part of the Agile Coaching Network, please look me up. I might actually, if you guys poke me enough on this, I might get us a small social event where we can get together and just have some great conversations. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone who's participated. If we didn't get to your questions this week, please put them into Slido, and then we'll vote those up over the next week. And with that, you guys have a great month.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.